Over the course of 200 years, an estimated $45 trillion of wealth was extracted from the Indian subcontinent. For centuries, India was historically resistant to conquest. Massive empires and military campaigns, including the armies of Alexander the Great, exhausted themselves trying to secure a foothold in the region and ultimately turned back. The entity that finally subdued this massive territory was a private corporation, a joint stock startup formed in London by 25 merchants in the year 1600. This enterprise began with a focus on trading spices. India was originally a secondary market, a pivot the company made only after being violently pushed out of Indonesia by Dutch rivals. This leads to a central question. How did a marginalized spice trading syndicate with a handful of ships manage the largest hostile takeover of a nation in human history? When the East India Company first landed in Gujarat in 1608, they had no leverage. To do business, they needed explicit trading permissions from the ruling power, the wealthy and expansive Mughal Empire. Company officer William Hawkins spent months trying to lobby Emperor Jahangir. The emperor rejected the English traders, preferring the established tax revenues he was already collecting from the Portuguese. The dynamic shifted in 1670. The English monarch, King Charles II, granted the company new corporate rights, allowing them to legally acquire territory and field their own private military. Armed with these new powers, company director Josiah Child decided to test their strength. In 1686, he ordered his newly minted private army to cross the line and declare open war directly on the Mughal Empire. The result was an immediate defeat. Mughal forces dismantled the company's factories and arrested their officers. To avoid total liquidation, the corporate directors were forced to beg the emperor for forgiveness and pay a 50 lakh fine. This failure forced the East India Company to drastically change their tactics. They lacked the resources to beat a unified state in open warfare and would need a strategy that didn't rely on direct military conflict. In 1707, Emperor Aurangzeb died. The unified Mughal Empire fractured into regional territories controlled by Nawabs. Exploiting this vacuum, the company rented out their militias, playing rival factions against one another to secure trade routes and political favors. In 1757, the company moved against the Nawab of Bengal at the Battle of Plassey, executing a calculated corporate boardroom coup. Before the engagement began, company officers secretly contacted the Nawab's lead army commander, Mir Jafar. They offered to install him as a puppet ruler if he stood down his troops, allowing the company to seize the wealthiest region in India by purchasing the loyalty of the opposition. The victory at Plassey proved that the company's most dangerous weapon was its capital. They had found that it was cheaper to buy an empire from the inside than to conquer it from the outside. This corporate takeover model was fully finalized after the 1764 Battle of Buxar. The company's forces defeated a coalition of regional rulers, forcing a settlement known as the Treaty of Allahabad. Through the treaty, the East India Company secured the right to collect taxes directly from the citizens of Bengal. The flow of revenue bypassed local governments, rerouting straight into corporate vaults in London. To accelerate their monopoly, they introduced the doctrine of lapse in 1848. This policy allowed the company to automatically absorb any Indian kingdom whose ruler died without a male heir, giving executives a mechanism to strip entire states through legal decree. By the middle of the 19th century, the East India Company had mutated from a syndicate of traders into a highly extractive and unregulated military dictatorship. This pursuit of profit pushed the Indian populace to the breaking point. Relentless agricultural taxes and a blatant disregard for local religious customs created a climate of deep resentment. The tension erupted in 1857 with a massive uprising known as the First War of Independence. Soldiers and civilians joined forces to dismantle company infrastructure. The scale of the retaliation was severe. Rebel forces targeted administrative centers and communication lines, nearly wiping out the company's network of control. While company militias eventually suppressed the revolt, the financial and political damage was terminal. The British government realized the corporation could no longer manage the region. Through the Government of India Act of 1858, the British Crown formally fired the East India Company. The government absorbed its private army and assets, placing Queen Victoria in direct control via an appointed viceroy. The British Raj began as a state bailout of a predatory, out-of-control corporation. formalizing the extraction of wealth that would reach $45 trillion over the next century.